What's up, my brothers and sisters? Welcome to the Fireground Fitness Podcast, where we talk about all things pertaining to life on and off the fireground. The views and the opinions expressed are those of your host and our guest. Today we sit down with Joe Spector. He's a retired firefighter, former police officer as well. Joe shares with us the injury that he sustained that led to his medical retirement and some of the subsequent difficulties that he's experienced all the way up to and including a suicide attempt. This caused him to reevaluate and form some tremendous coping mechanisms, with some of which he shares with us today. And there's so much that we learn from this conversation with Joe. I hope you enjoy. Thanks for tuning in. Joe, thank you for sitting down and rapping with me today. I want to talk about your journey into the fire service. I want to talk about the work you're doing now with public safety and mental health and all this other stuff, and your guide to grit, growth, and gratitude. I read through this, and I want to point out a few things in here and just talk about how you're approaching this. So let's start from the beginning. What got you into this? So if I understand correctly, you were a gunslinger back in the day.
That's a generous interpretation. That was in my mind what I was, I think, or what I was going for at least.
Perfect. So let's go way back. Where'd you start at? Where'd you grow up?
So I grew up in Phoenix, Central Phoenix, kind of 7th Avenue and Indian School.
Right, local boy.
Yeah, local boy. Not the best neighborhood in a good way. Came up, had to learn street smarts growing up, and went to NAU. Just a little bit. Went to college at Northern Arizona University, and studied.
Nice. On campus up there?
On campus.
Beautiful.
Yes. I went into the 3-year degree program because I wanted to get hired by the police department as soon as I turned 21, but I wanted a degree beforehand, so I hustled through college.
So did you have PD aspirations? Like, at what age did you start thinking about that?
So when I was about 18 or 19 and I was at Phoenix College, kind of not knowing what I wanted to do, I went on a ride along with one of my sister's friends who was a Phoenix officer, and it was wild. It was like typical Maryville in the late 90s. Like, it was just chases and so much fun. And I was like, what am I doing in business school? This is fun and adventure. Learned that NAU had a criminal justice program that I could switch over to. Learned that the police department hired right at 21 and I could graduate at 20 if I jumped in their 3-year degree program. And so I just hustled because I definitely wanted a degree. I don't know if I wanted it or my parents wanted it. You're kind of conditioned at that time, but I knew I had to have a degree and I wanted to be in law enforcement.
You were told you wanted it.
Exactly. And I bucked the system. They didn't want me going in public safety. I'm like an outlier in my family in that regard. But so I graduated and tested everywhere. And Phoenix was on a hiring freeze. I didn't really know a lot of these little cities, but I tested everywhere. And surprise, I had no business being a police officer. I looked like I was 12 years old and I had no life experience, but thank God they picked me up, and that was the start of my career. Nice.
So how long were you in PD?
Just a hair under 4 years. I went to Phoenix Police Academy and then was on patrol for about 3.5 years in Surprise.
So what about, I have no experience with law enforcement, but I know a few cops, and I feel like you got out at the right time.
Yeah, I'd say so, dude. I cannot imagine.
What was it about being about being a police officer? So you crossed over to fire. So like, obviously there was something in your DNA. What was the difference?
I'm clearly designed to be a firefighter, not a police officer. That's how I identify. I'm friends with all the cops still. I left there on great terms, and I can drop into 10 code and talking like them any day of the week. But
that's awesome.
Where I used to work, it's really developed now, but it was just kind of like the small town site, the square mile. And I got really tight with the firefighters there. And I would I don't know, police work was not all of that fun and adventure from that ride along that I had. It's a lot of fighting and conflict and different leadership struggles and getting spit on and kicked while you're going to taking people to jail. And I would go to the fire stations afterwards and like use the restroom. And these guys are like playing ping pong, playing video games, playing cards with the chief, being like, what are you doing over there, dude? And I just they started planting seeds. Like, I wasn't ready to hear it at first. I was like, oh yeah, no, I would never go over there. I'm honored. But then it was like enough rough calls, enough bad leadership, enough of them seeing me on scenes and being like, you should be over here, dude. And it just kind of like, one day I kind of came home with it and I was like, I wonder if I actually could or should do that.
If they're okay out there. So sorry.
No, that's okay.
So Woodard could do that, and then what happened?
So I was on a 962, and there was a homeless dude who we were helping out, and he was just really hard up. I don't even remember what his involvement was with the scene, but we were at a Chevron parking lot, and fire was there, and it was just me as far as PD. And I went and bought the guy some food. I was kind of just like being nice. The call was over or whatever. And one of my buddies, Dave, who's still out in Surprise, he's a captain now. I think he was just a firefighter at the time, though. He was like, "Hey, I'm serious about all this stuff I've been telling you, and I'm tasked with like recruiting and finding people who we think would be good fits to like, come over here or whatever.
Yeah.
And this is awesome what you just did. You need to get out of the police department. You need to come to the fire department. Like, I'm serious. Swing by." And so I went by. He had me like put on his turnouts. We were doing push-ups. He was kind of just sharing with me what the job entailed, because I never did like a red shirt program. I never did an academy. I was never really that interested in it.
Right.
And then I just started kind of hanging out over there more and more and just establishing friendships. And Dave was really the big pusher. And then another guy, Damien, another one of my good friends, I was a booter and he was a booter, PD and fire. And so we were running calls, getting like, the cops and the firemen who were salty were just like, making us clean up and making us their boot, together. So we were going through it. And so at that time, he's like, "Dave's right, dude. People are talking about you coming over here. You really should." And I just kind of started doing some ride-alongs. And at the time, Surprise PD has really good leadership right now, but this is like 20 years ago. They were going through one of their transitional states where there was a lot of infighting in management. It was not a great working environment. And so there was just a lot of variables. And so screw it, I'm going to test. And I tested and ended up getting number one and didn't make the Chief White. Our fire chief was really happy. He wanted to steal a cop. The police chief was not too happy. They had a little rivalry. So that was kind of weird being in the middle of that. But then I went down to Phoenix Police Academy, and the minute I stepped into the firehouse, I was like, okay, this is home. Same set of adventure, not in an office, shift work, helping people, but like too much conflict and chaos and not enough hijinks and joking around and camaraderie. And so it just really fit I needed to learn how to be assertive and have conflict resolution. I needed that so bad. And I'm so thankful for my time on the police department and taught me that. I really needed it. But like, that's a place I like to go to when I have to. That's not my baseline. I like, deeper connection and more feeling the positive feels and things like that. All the stuff that the customer service guide, all the stuff that all of the philosophy in the fire service is like not cliche to me. I hold it very dear, and it resonated with my spirit immedietely when like Brunacini stuff, all that stuff about Surprise, like on our trucks, always there, always ready. Like none of, I'm a fire nerd, I guess you would say. Like all of that, like it hit my soul deeply, and I just and then the relationships and then the calls, I just really never looked back.
Well, I believe that we come away with something from every experience we have. So if you were to look back on your PD career, though it was short, right? What's your number one takeaway from that? What did you learn? You talked about leadership and kind of resiliency, and you mentioned that a minute ago. Is that what you were focused on, or?
No, I think I learned a lot of that later on through the fire department, through my parenting, especially testing for captain and then having mental health struggles down the road. I think definitely confrontation and conflict and assertive communication and how to like really step it up and amplify it if you need to, but also how to kind of verbally diffuse things and how to not be afraid to be in a fight, whether it's with a fellow officer or like a gangbanger on the street. Like I needed that experience. I still lived at home. I was 20 years old when I started testing. I was a baby. I was a mama's boy. I like that, but like I needed to get out and get in the real world. And I think that 3.5 years on the PD was like way more influential than the bachelor's degree I got at NAU. It was like the school of hard knocks, seeing how the real world was. And I just, in a lot of ways, I grew up really fast, I think, and in a lot of good ways, like, as far as learning about life and death. And, you're seeing 20 times a day the people in the worst case scenario.
Right.
And so gaining empathy and also learning to stand up for myself and just also to like the discipline, like we were talking earlier about kind of David Goggins, like getting pepper sprayed and pushing through. I guess actually I didn't realize it at the time, but that was probably the most formative thing for my resilience, like having to push through, getting pepper sprayed, having to run 11 miles on shin splints every day, being at a stage of the game where the RTOs could put their hands on you and hit you with their hats and stuff. Like, like I kind of had it hard in a lot of ways and pushed way beyond wherever I mentally thought I could go, I definitely pushed past that. And I that's, circle back. I wasn't prepared for that question, but that's the answer. I know that I can push myself to do almost anything that's damn near impossible because my, like you said, mental fortitude and resiliency, I think was truly tested in the police academy. And that's probably the biggest thing I'll take away. Plus, they're so deep on principles like integrity and things like that. At least in the academy, it's like drilled into you.
Yeah.
And I think from like a male standpoint, like I wanted that. Like I needed like a code and an ethic and a team and like, you know, like something bigger than me and a purpose. And so I think those are the biggest things I got out of that career.
No, I love that. I look back on some of my early forming phases of my life, and I use that expression specifically because that's what they call it. And they call it in Marine Corps boot camp. They call that the forming phase, where they're stripping you down and pushing you to places you've never been before. And it's a unique experience. I wish everybody could have that experience, because there's something valuable in and some self-discovery in that, right? Learning what you're capable of, I've had I got into endurance sports later on. We haven't talked about any of this stuff, but people on the podcast have probably heard me blather on about this before. But I got into endurance sports partly because I need to know how far I could go. And I learned so much about my own mental capacity, my own, limitations, how they were in my brain versus my body.
Same.
Right? And that's what you're talking about,
Yes.
which is so amazing and such an important thing for us to do. And I don't think enough of us get those opportunities.
I think you're exactly right. And I do think there is an element where we can add to that intentionally ourselves, though. Like, it's a reason. I think there's a lot of physiological reasons why the ice baths are great, but I love that I'm seeing these guys do the ice baths a lot now, simply because if you really don't want to get in that cold water, it's ice cold. And then you tell yourself, suck it up. I can do this. I can do hard things. You step in there for 5 minutes and then you get out. Do that over and over again every day. Then when the grief hits, the guy cuts you off in traffic, the kids are melting down, whatever it is. Okay, I can relax through this. I can relax through that hard yoga pose. I can relax through that crazy workout. I can relax through that fist fight or getting pepper sprayed or the cold water, whatever it is. But in that case, it forces you to do it, and it's way above and beyond what you could do. RTOs are going to drive that out of you, or boot camp, way more than you can do yourself. So I feel extra lucky that I had that. But also, too, I kind of try and continue that myself, push myself to do hard things as a practice.
Yeah. Yeah. That's what type of things do you do to practice that?
So sometimes it's like not fighting a battle. So it'll be interesting. Like I find that like I'll take the lessons I learned in the police academy, like fighting through getting pepper sprayed and being in so much pain. And then like when one of my kids are melting down, and like I'm a human, so I'm triggered and I want to like yell back at them. But the reality is maybe my son is struggling and he needs his dad to sit with him in it and take a little bit of that heat and relax with him and show him how to emotionally regulate. And so not engaging in that battle and taking a breath and being soft with my kids, sometimes I'll use that same fortitude that it took to go into battle to like withdraw from a battle at home. Or so like a lot of times it'll be practicing with my family, like saying the thing that I want to for my principles and my values, not what like my compulsion is to. Or it's yoga, working out, ice baths, pretty much any of the practices that keep me healthy, I never want to do. I can't explain it. I don't ever want to take my medicine. Like I'm a meditation enthusiast. I never want to sit down and meditate. I almost never want to work out, even though I feel great every time. So I kind of try to force myself to have discipline in the things that like that are either adding value to the people I lead or my own health or my quality of life. I try to keep a discipline even when the motivation isn't there, because the motivation is almost never there, to be honest with you.
Yeah. Well, that's it's funny, discipline versus motivation. I love that you brought that up, because motivation is such a fleeting element. I use the Rocky Balboa. Like you can watch a Rocky Balboa clip and you're like, life ain't all sunshine and rainbows. And you're like, yeah, Rocky, that's what I'm talking about, man. And you get pumped up and you're fired up. And then you head out on a run. And then the wind hits you in the face, the pain in your legs creeps in, the difficulty of breathing, like you head up a hill and you're hurting, and suddenly the discipline to stay with the activity is what will keep you in the activity, because the motivation goes away. So, at 4:30 in the morning when your alarm goes off and you're supposed to be popping out of bed and heading for a run, nobody really wants to do that, right? But it's discipline. It's not motivation. Rocky Balboa is not in your head at that point. You have to have the discipline to pop up and go do
Yes.
the thing. Yeah, that's such a important thing to consider.
It's like happiness and inner peace. I think we shoot for happiness, but happiness comes and goes. Like you get a good tax return, or like your kids are doing well and you're happy. You lose a loved one, you're sad. Like circumstances change, but if you have like resilience or inner peace or emotional regulation, those things transcend. Just like discipline can transcend. The motivation will come and go. The good circumstances, the happiness will come and go. But if you have your mental foundation and your emotional foundation, those things are stable.
Yes. You know what comes to my mind? You get a great tax return, right? Oh, a bunch of money comes in. They inject the money, and you're like, this too shall pass.
Yeah.
Right? And then something bad happens. You spend all that money.
Exactly.
You lose it gambling at the casino. This too shall pass, right? Like everything comes and goes, and you look at it, the climate system, right? Storms come in and storms go out. Yeah. Well, the situation changes. It evolves under our feet.
Everything is temporary, and you don't know what is good or bad. Have you ever heard when you're talking about this too shall pass? I'll butcher this, but there's like a Zen proverb about the gentleman who's like a farmer and he has horses, and basically he loses the horse, and the whole village is like, "Oh, that's awful." And he's like, "Is it?" He won't put a label, good or bad. And then the horses come back, and I don't remember. And then the son comes to town, and they're like, "Oh, your son is great." And he's like, "Oh, is it?" And then the military comes to conscript
the son
people.
get
the son falls off the horse, basically.
Right.
One of the
Breaks
horses
his
they got
leg or
back, and they're like, "Oh, it was terrible that the horse came back because now your son's leg is broken." And he's like, is it good? Is it bad? And then the military comes, they try and draft him, but the son can't go to war and die because his leg broke. It was just like everything is temporary, and we never really know until we have that distant viewpoint what was good or what was bad. I'm hesitant to put any labels on anything because of that.
Yeah. Yeah. So being a cop, was it good? Is it?
Exactly. Is it? It was. It was it like he says, is it so? It was so.
Yeah.
I was a police officer, and there was good and bad. Overall, I would say a lot of the things that I thought were awful were the best part of it. I guess that's what I'm getting at in retrospect. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah. Well, it is interesting that we take that retrospective position and we can reevaluate our lives. And what I think, not to wax too philosophical here, but let's do it.
I love that.
Is, when we look at these things that have happened to us, right? And we talk about having this perspective like, oh, this thing happened and I learned this lesson. Well, the key is taking that lesson and now applying it to the future things.
Bingo.
Right? And that's super hard to do.
But that's where the wisdom is if you apply that to your present moment, because so often the lessons are wasted, the lessons of other people or our own pain, and then we're still stuck in that fear or that perspective. And it's normal, I think, but I try so hard to carry that perspective when quote unquote bad things happen to me right now. Like this too shall pass, and is it that bad? And how many doors have been slammed in my face that have turned into windows? I think that's the pivotal part, is to keep that viewpoint in the present moment.
So we look back and you decided to become a firefighter. And so good, right?
Yes.
We start making good decisions in our life.
I'll label that one good.
So you get on the job out there, and what's that like?
It was different. I kind of came on when it wasn't that easy to be a booter, and so that was an adjustment to go from like literally taking away people's constitutional rights in life and death to be like, you didn't clean the trash can good enough, boot. And I'm like, oh, what? No, you guys were so cool when I was getting hired. But I got through booting here.
You're like, wait a minute, I think you forgot who I am.
Yeah, hold on. In my head, that's what I'm thinking. Out loud, it's yes, sir. But no, it wasn't terrible. It was just that was an adjustment. But overall, it was a huge adjustment, and it was so much better. Like, it was just like I learned how to deal with conflict and stuff on the PD. I learned how to live with other people in the fire department. Like, that was a hard adjustment for me at first.
Were you still living at home?
I wasn't living at home. I was living in my own home, but I went from like living in a house where nobody really stepped on each other's toes. I was pretty much latchkey. So like I didn't have, my sister lived at home too, but she was 7 or 8 years older than me. And so there was not a lot of having to adjust to people's quirks or people adjusting to my quirks, and like drawing the line on like how to be a considerate roommate. And so those were tough balances too, but those were like, I think that was the best part about it. Now I travel with my friends who, some guys you love on the job and off the job. Some guys you love to work with, but you wouldn't hang out with. Some guys you hang out with, but you wouldn't work with. I have groups of guys on the job who I loved working with, and I loved living with them, and I love hanging out with them off duty. And now we go travel, and it's like, it's so much easier than I'm joking, but my wife will laugh. But like this last trip, I went to Colorado with my family, and I was like, Wes and Brantley are so much easier to travel with. And, I'm talking to my wife, my kids. I'm like, you guys suck. Why are you guys here? I need the guys. Like, we live together. It's like a seamless operation when we travel, you know? So, building up that type of camaraderie, I did all like individual stuff growing up, like swimming and martial arts, and like, so not a lot of team sports. So like just something as stupid as doing skills courses or ultimate frisbee, like that sort of team camaraderie was really, really fun for me. That was new and exciting. Living with people, but also the dynamic of, and like you mentioned earlier, it's probably much harder to be a police officer now than it was when I was, but like even back then, the dynamic of people thanking us and like just like it's humbling when you go to a thankless job where you're kind of doing the same thing, and then people are coming over and crying and saying, here's some cookies, you saved my son, or here's my son, you guys saved him 10 years ago, or whatever, like those types of things, or the interactions, or the grocery store, the little, like the fun stuff. That was pretty wild experience to go from being like kind of hated to loved. Wasn't even something I was
I'm
thinking
the same
about.
guy.
Exactly.
And all I did was change my t-shirt.
Exactly. And I wasn't even really thinking about that. Probably like in retrospect, that could be an element you get into the job for, because people love firemen or whatever, depending on where you are in the time. But like, I wasn't even thinking about that. So it was like overwhelming, to go from like, again, nobody wants a cop there unless you're the one who called 911 most of the time. So it was a lot of hostilities to like, man, we're endeared here. Like, this is amazing. So that was cool. I still never really learned how to cook. I'm good at chopping and cleaning. That was hard for me.
Some guys just have an innate talent. Others do not. They have no business in the kitchen.
That's how I am. I'll work my butt off to try and make it easy it's like if you're a medic, like if it's a diabetic call, like I'm going to get the bag ready, the glucose, like I'm going to try and make your job as easy as possible, but I'm not the medic. You're doing the job. So like I'll prep, I'll cook, I'll clean, I'll chop, I'll dice, like I'll do the duties, but cook me a good meal. I don't know how to do it.
That's great. So let's talk about kind of the arc of your journey, though. So you're not a firefighter anymore, right? So there was something that led to a different path. So let's kind of talk about kind of what happened in the fire service for you.
Okay.
Well, or maybe just in public safety in general. I think it's the totality of it that is what we're talking about here, not just any one particular thing, police or fire per se.
Yeah, I think so too. I had a pretty good arc of my career. I left the PD on great terms, tested for engineer. My first test, I didn't do that well. My second test, I got number one, got promoted to engineer. That was awesome. I love driving. BLS
driving
engineer.
The BRTs, man.
That's the best job on the planet, BLS engineer. Oh my gosh. Like, as far as just like fun and like, I miss driving a fire truck. It's so much fun. And I had a great crew. And it was just, I was living the dream for a little while there. And then, let's see, I think, 3.5 years on PD, 4 years on PD, 4 years as a firefighter. I don't know, three years maybe into driving, and it was I think it was 3 or 4 years in. It was time to start studying for the captain's test, and that's a buddy of mine, former Marine, and then my current captain who I was driving for. They really took me under their wings, and that was honestly it was interesting because all of those lessons I now know I'm applying them in a totally different field. I thought I was going to be applying them as a fire captain, but that was short-lived. But it didn't matter because I really took it to heart and I nerded out and I did like the soul searching thing that you're supposed to do when you test for captain. I read like every leadership book, and that was when I think my first layer of like self-awareness and evolution and leadership started coming from, because I had just like worked for some really good leaders who I wanted to emulate. I had worked for some really bad bosses who I knew I never wanted to be like. I had never managed a crew. I think I was a dad at the time, but my kids were like babies. So it wasn't like now it's like, you're a captain at home. It's easy to put out fires and deal with conflict and stuff like that. But I didn't have any of that experience. And then I was learning the tactics and running calls, and I just like got into it. It was so much fun. My captain who I was driving for at the time, like he moved me up every shift. It was just like, he went out of his way. We were drilling nonstop, and it was like super like scary and testing me, but also super supportive. And it was cool. I just like really stepped into my own. I was like really coming into my own, and I was leading, and it was awesome.
What was it about being a captain that it really intrigued you?
It was the fact that I think it's the most influential position on the fire truck in a lot of ways. I'd had captains who could affect my life at home based on how they give you time off or how they treat you on shift when you're going home to your family, or just different things like that, or shielding you or throwing you under the bus. If maybe a head chief if they're justified, it's one thing, but sometimes managers are maybe out of line and you need somebody to shield you or whatever. Like, I think it's the position that had the most effect on me, positive and negative, in my career trajectory, my happiness on the job. And it's such an important position. And then,
hey, I will add to that. I always joke around and say, hey, listen, the fire chief can stand on top of admin and shake their fists. We need this to be done. But until the fire captain makes it so, they are truly the pivot point in the organization.
Yes.
Where it goes from, policy and mandate to action.
Yes.
Right. They're the ones carrying out the action where the rubber meets the road, so to speak.
And morale too. Like, if the chiefs are doing something that we have to do now and we don't like it, like the graveyard thing or just something, how that captain sits down and delivers that message to the guys, like, hey, this sucks. They're doing their best for us, or we don't even like it, but we're going to control our environment here, and we're going to have a good time while we're doing it. We're not going to complain, or we're going to be negative and we're going to bitch. You really foster that environment, and it's like, it's weird because a battalion chief is not at every fire station all the time. So there's a lot of little subcultures within each station that they're not even aware of, and it's really the tone is led by the captain,
100%.
Or even on going to a call, like a really scary call, like a drowning or whatever, like. I liked that challenge of having to slow down and having to be confident and assertive, but get my guys confident. I didn't like it when I would be spinning up and I could see it bleeding over to them. Something about that, leadership, but not managing or putting your thumb on somebody, but actually stepping up to the plate and trying to be the best version of yourself so that the mission gets done, and that at least at a minimum, if there's 3 guys in that station, even if they don't feel cared about, I know I care about them. I want them going home to their family. I want them being happy. I want them being healthy. I want them that. Just, I don't know. It just felt right to me. And then I think I'm like a dog with a bone. I always want a project or a growth thing. I like to be outside of my comfort zone. And that was learning how to lead and learning how to do tactics and hazmat. All of that was just such an awesome thing for me to sink my teeth into. And then, my best friend was my captain, and he just invested so much into me that it was we were working our ass off to get me ready for that seat, but it was so much fun too. You know what I mean? It was just, it's the best time of my life. And I was so supported by other captains and chiefs. It was neat seeing people, hey man, I printed a random battalion chief, hey, I printed up this training for you or whatever, this thing on just so many people, when I was not quite confident that I was ready to do it, nudging me in that direction also, I think appealed to me as far as motivation. That's cool. People are telling me, if you get promoted, I'd like to work for you. That's a good feeling to have, or and then chiefs are telling me we want you in this spot when you do this, or running these grants. Or I don't know. It was just the next evolution, and it felt really cool.
So you're in that process and you're building and learning and growing. And then where'd you go from there?
So we had our first, new outside agency conducting a test, and it was pretty rigorous. It was a tough test. And it was 2 years of studying, and I think 30 of us tested for one spot with maybe another 2 potential over the next 2 years while the list happened. So, took the test, got number 2 on the test. So that was cool. My buddy got promoted, so I was sitting in the number 1 spot, and one of our captains was in the office and in the drop and using a lot of PTO. So they had a spot for me. I was her field spot basically. So I almost right away got put in an acting spot and had my own truck and my own crew. And so that was awesome. And then I would be running a fire call and get a message on the MCT from my captain who had just mentored me. Bro, you crushed it with that on senior report. It was so cool. We were actually doing it, and it was so neat. Running calls it's different. I don't know, minor things like landing a helicopter. That's not a major call test, but your first one when you're the captain and you're doing it. I got to have all of those, you know what I mean? Get my first fire, get my first on scene report, do all this stuff. First working fire was amazing. It just was I don't know, it's such a cool feeling of accomplishment. And I had a good crew and we were having fun and we were getting into our groove and we had a routine every Sunday. We had breakfast and it was cool. And that went on for about 12 months. And our captain who was in the office was 3 months away from retiring. So I essentially had a spot. So she was in the drop. When she retired, I was going to get promoted. I was getting paid and acting in that spot. So kind of that's where I was at.
Nice.
And then the shit hit the fan and my life kind of took a downhill turn, unexpected.
Yeah.
Should we head towards that now?
Yeah.
Let's
talk about that.
So right as
you can't just say, and then the shit hit the fan and be like, you want to talk about that?
You're right. Not a good segue. Sorry, bro.
No, of course we want to talk about that.
Trying to pique your interest here. All right.
No, you got me. You
okay.
got me hook, line, sinker. Let's go.
So like at that time, everything was awesome, dude. My salary was pretty good. I think I had my very first 6-figure year ever. I just had broken 100, which was amazing for me. And my wife's a teacher. I had 2 little kiddos at home who were doing really well. I had my own truck. It was fun. The kids would come to the station and draw pictures of dad being the captain and my guys would be cooking dinner. It was just awesome. And then I had an injury on the job, which was relatively catastrophic as far as the symptoms that I have and the outcome of it. But it was such a goofy injury that it was very embarrassing because I had a kick-ass career and I was on a nosebleed call and I got moved back down for the first time in probably 10 months. And I was driving for my old truck and we were at a golf course and we'd just run a nosebleed call. And this elderly gal, we couldn't get her, we had her clamped up and stuff. I think she needed to get her nose cauterized. And so we were wrapping the call up. She had gotten transported. I was down on the ground putting our monitor cords away. I had my back to my crew and they were talking to the patient's husband and I wasn't really paying attention to them. And then I don't know exactly what happened, but the patient's husband was this like obese guy, elderly guy with a golf bag. He tripped while he was talking to my captain and he fell back on top of me, but he fell onto my head. And so like all of his body weight, his golf bag hit my head and then he's like laying on top of me and I'm like kneeled down and I already had some bulge discs in my neck. But while he was on top of me, my crew was like rocking him, trying to like pick him up off me. He's a big dude. And I could just feel like lightning in my arm, like when I got tased on the police department, like shooting from my neck to my fingertips, like hot lightning pain. And they got him off of me and my neck hurt. And my captain, like, I don't know exactly how I was displaying, but I clearly like had lost my composure a little bit because he's like, Joe, are you okay? And I said, give me a fucking minute, Mike. And I would never cuss on a call. And I very much respect Mike. And I've never, but like, that's just like something that we all kind of talk about, like how bad it must have been for me to like say that in front of all those citizens, you know. And my friend Pat, who I was telling you about earlier, he drove the truck home because I couldn't even drive, man. My neck just hurt so bad and it was shooting down my arm. And it ended up just being an exacerbation of a TBI that I had 100 years ago on top of some disc herniations. And I ended up getting this thing called dystonia, which some medics know about. I had literally never even heard of it, but it's this muscular disorder because of the brain injury. My neck locks up, my eyes spasm, my jaw locks up. I have some deficits in my arm. I have a normal life, but I just couldn't get cleared by my doctor to go back on the truck. And so my union VP was like, hey, when's your return date? And I'm like, okay, I'm sure. Let me get all this squared away. It's still hurting, but epidural physical therapy, I'm sure it'll be fine. I went to my neurologist. He's like, I'm sorry, I thought I was clear. Like, this is definitely permanent and progressive. I told you that when this happened a long time ago.
Like, no. That's for normal people.
Exactly.
This is me here, bro.
Exactly. And I'm like, what can I do? You know? And he's like, no, like for sure. This is going to get way worse as you get older too. Like, cause I get these Botox injections that stop my eyes from spasming, but the Botox, because of the FDA, you can only get it every 3 months. So it usually wears off at about 2 months and then my eyes are spasming and sometimes I can't drive because of it. It's really like, I don't live in it. It doesn't bother me too much. I'm totally at peace with it, but it's just some weird symptoms that cause a lot of pain and discomfort that definitely they were saying wasn't safe to be on the truck. And so I fought my doctor respectfully. He said, I can get you a second opinion if you want. So we went down to Barrows Neurological, same exact opinion as my doctor. We were still at the Phoenix Health Center. I went down to them and showed them what those doctors said. They said, yeah, that's what's going on. So then I just ended up having to fill out disability paperwork for my retirement and going through that whole procedure. And I literally got my medical pension like the month I was supposed to get my promotion to captain. So it was just like literally same building, same room, wrong ceremony, like, you know, and it was just.
How hard was that?
Dude, it was one of the hardest things I've ever experienced. Can we swear on here?
Fuck yeah.
It fucking sucked, bro. It was so painful. Like, it came at the worst time. Like, I had just worked my balls off for that captain's test, and I was so close I could taste it. And so I'm like in purgatory because they have these meetings. They send you to independent medical examiners.
Yeah.
All their doctors said the same thing my doctor said. So at least there was no stress with that. But it was just like, it was just weird. I was like at home for 6 months and then showing up at these doctor's appointments and then go to this meeting. And then literally, I don't remember the exact date. I might be off on this, but I think it was like a month or so away from when I was actually supposed to be promoted is when I went in there and they read my independent medical evaluation, read my doctor's report, read my captain's report of the injury because everybody was on scene. Like, there was really not a lot of disputing what had happened.
Right.
And I just remember them voting. It was real quiet. They voted to retire me. And then just like this shrieking sob. And it was my wife. I hadn't even really remembered she was in the room, but like she was like in the civilian area. And it was just her crying, and the city attorney who was on the board, pension board, going and giving her tissues, and everybody hugging me and telling me thank you for your service. And it was just like so weird, dude. And I got in the parking lot with my wife, and I was just like, what the fuck? I was crying, dude. I was sad. Like I definitely didn't want to stay like 100 years, but I wasn't ready to go at 15 years right when I was about to get promoted. I was at the pinnacle, dude. It was like everything was so good. And also, like, I don't know how to live off of our pension. Like, I was doing pretty good, but 50%'s a big old cut, you know? And so it's just like all at once. And I got home, I threw up, like I was physiologically, like just emotional, I guess.
Yeah.
And I was just like pacing around my house, almost like an animal, you know, like these, like in the circus, like these tigers and now I have emotional processing skills. I didn't have any of that at the time. And so I told
and can I just say that there's a lot of grief associated with that.
So much grief.
Yeah. And I think we underestimate the loss that we can experience in an injury, and then the subsequent loss of a job related to that. Like, it's just like the dominoes are falling.
Yeah.
And you're losing these things that are part of who you are. Particularly, you talk about the captaincy, like, hey, I'm right here. I'm about to get promoted. They're going to seal the deal. I'm going to be a made man.
Yes.
And then, no, your life is going to go in a different direction.
Yeah.
And so of course you have this this emotional grief response related to that. It's so hard, but I think we have to label it as such because so many times we're like, oh, I'm just being a punk. You know, I got to just toughen up.
Yeah.
Well, you do have to grieve. You have to go through that process.
It's both.
Yeah.
We do need to be tough and resilient. And sometimes we need to move forward, but not at the expense of dismissing our feelings and not processing them and not grieving them.
Yeah, you got to identify it.
You got to identify it and feel it and heal it and process it in whatever way is best for you. But like shoving it under the rug isn't processing it. And it was grief. You labeled it perfectly. I was grieving what I thought was about to be, which was like, I was already shopping for those captain shirts, bro. You know what I mean? Like, I was ready to go call up special teams and be like, I need 6 collared shirts.
Cancel your order. You're like, sorry guys, just go ahead and cancel that.
Grieving the fact that, like, when you go to a party, it's like cool to tell people what you do. Now it's like, what? A guy fell on you with a golf. Like, it's like, now it's this stupid story and I got to talk about this injury that nobody's ever heard of. So like I went and isolated because it was like so awkward because everybody wants to know what's going on.
Yeah, you got to make up a better story, bro. Like, structural collapse, of a, big wall fell on you here. So
what sucks is, like, I've been around. I almost got killed by power lines. I've been on a fire with a structural collapse. I literally got shot at. I've had all sorts of cool stuff, and that's how I went out. There's grief involved in that, bro. That's a rough. Like, I'm good with it now. That was a really hard pill to swallow. Like, because there's grief involved with, you never think about this, but how your career ends. Something as silly as that little retirement party that the department throws for you or whatever. There's to say you did the job to completion and left on your own terms. When you don't get that, it sucks, and it's like a piece getting ripped away from you. And then, even just like the kids coming to the station, like I love that. Like that was so fun. Like that's gone. You know what I mean? Like coffee with the guys and stuff is gone. Like all of that money, like there was so much grief involved. And then it got worse because so I was like at home, I didn't understand grief at all. And I didn't have processing tools to cope with grief. And so I was just like, I don't know, like I said, like a caged animal. So I told my wife, I think we should go, we had gotten the kids a babysitter because it was going to be obviously a rough day or whatever. I think we should go grab the kids and go to a movie. And she was like, what? And I'm like, honestly, I don't know what to do. Like I just have this need to escape and like go somewhere. And I'm thinking maybe that would be, the word is disassociation. I didn't know that at the time, right? Like a healthy disassociation. So we go grab the kids. We go to the Lego Ninjago movie, and it's better, but I'm still just like, it's just weird. I was just at the retirement thing this morning, and now I'm at the movies with my kids, and they don't have a grasp on it because they're still babies. Yeah. And so I'm just like still uncomfortable, but it's better. I'm glad that I'm out with them. Like, and I'm still like, we're watching the movie, but not paying attention to the movie, just like playing back my career and the meeting from today. And I start getting this text message from one of my dear friends, Dan. He's one of my best friends. And it's from his wife, and I haven't talked to her in a while, or him. He moved to Texas, and it's like text message. And I'm like, I tell her, I was kind of short with her, like, because I'm not in a good place. I'm like, Dem, I'll call you back. Demarie is her name. Dem, I'll call you back. Like, I can't talk right now. And like, that's like after 5 text messages. And then she's like, have you heard about Dan? And I'm like, no, what happened? She said, Dan's dead. She sends me a news story of he got drunk and he pulled out in front of a tow truck, and whether it was on purpose or not, we don't know, but he got horrifically killed in a car accident.
Oh man.
And I learned about that the day I was at the movies, the day I medically retired. And so for the second time that day, I've literally, to the best of my recollection, I've never thrown up from like emotions, but I was at the AMC Esplanade. Dude, like, she told me it's like, the reason I have kids is because of him. Like, I never wanted kids. His little daughter like fell in love with me when she was a baby, and we had this great relationship, and he was like my influence to be a dad. He's just one of my best friends, dude. Really, really good dude. And I was just, so I just lost my career and one of my best friends in one day. And I went in the bathroom, dude. And I was just projectile vomiting. And then I kind of walked out there's like a balcony there, and I was just kind of like holding on to it, trying to get perspective. Like, it was just, I remember like gripping onto the balcony ledge. Like, I felt like I was in a different reality, you know? And it was just like, kind of like what we talked about earlier. Like, you don't know how resilient you are until you get thoroughly tested like that.
Right.
And so
you have no idea how you're going to respond till you get in the middle of that. And,
exactly.
And it is not what you would expect.
No.
Yeah.
Especially like, I believe that the hard chargers like us, I think it's a disadvantage for us, honestly. I think the fact that we can push through so many things, like you can disassociate and run a drowning call without your emotions catching up with you. Like, that's what makes us able to do what we do.
Right.
But then like, we're so out of touch with that touchy-feely stuff, or feeling those feelings, that it's like, we are also human, and we're going to experience this stuff. And like it or not, we need to have these skills and be equipped. And so that was day one of that year where the shit hit the fan, and it just continued to progressively get worse. I almost felt like I was on like a hidden camera TV show. Like, is this serious? Like, my mom stopped. She had kind of like cognitive issues, and over the next few months, she stopped recognizing me or my kids. My mother-in-law passed away. Both my dogs got cancer, and one of my dogs died the same week my grandma died. And all of these deaths were things that not only we were having to cope with, but we had a pediatric counselor who I couldn't afford because my income had been cut in half, but they were teaching us how to share with our kids. Like, you can't go see grandma anymore. Uncle Dan has passed away. Grandma Donna has passed away. Like, Roxy, our dog, is dying. Like, and my kids are like, now they're like 6 and 5 at this time. I think they're and just like, it seemed like every 2 weeks we were sitting down across the table, to the point where one of them, when my wife's father-in-law died, and I had a really good relationship with him. He was a Vietnam vet, very hard charger, who later in life, sorry, bro, man down. He got into the feelings too. Like, he got deep into counseling because, like I mentioned, my mother-in-law passed away. She had a rough battle with cancer during this time, and he was like full-time caretaker for her. And that it was rough and it was traumatic. And then, so he started getting into counseling, which then unpacked Vietnam, because he was an infantry army dude. Yeah. And we were kind of like both going through grief and healing and counseling together. So we were like crying. Like, this guy, I've been dating my wife since I was 16. So he's like a father figure in my life, but we never had that type of relationship. But then we both hit this evolution. It was beautiful. But then he passed away, and I'll never forget. It was like the 5th or 6th time we had to like sit with our kids across the table, and my son just being like, who's dead now? And I was like, oh my gosh, dude. And so my kids were just like floundering. They were so well adjusted prior to this, but like, dad's no longer a firefighter. Uncle's dead. Friend's dead. Dog is dead. Grandma's dead. Other grandma doesn't recognize you. Like, their little lives got flipped like upside down, and they started having mental and emotional difficulties too. And we're just struggling, like getting kicked out of school, or like big meltdowns, like ones that lasted 4 or 5 hours, where property was getting broken and screamed, like stuff that I was not ever anticipating, but they were traumatized, you know? Yeah. And my wife and I, we have these skills now, but we didn't have any skill sets for emotional coping or conflict resolution. So she began drinking during this time, and that's how she was coping. So we were really disconnected and fighting a lot. And it was just weird, dude, because like 1 minute I was on top of the world. I was like a hero. It felt like, like I might as well have been an A-shifter with a cape, because like I just had this like storybook life, dude.
Yeah.
And then the next minute, everybody was dead or dying. My finances were in the toilet. My union or my member services, thank God they paid a medical bill. Like workers' comp ended up covering it, but like I had always done Dave Ramsey and had helped people financially. I had never needed help.
Yeah.
And just like,
which there's a lot of, like those types of things like start putting a lot of shame on us.
yes,
Right. And we feel a lot of shame. It doesn't put it on us, but we feel the shame, and which is its own set of, mental health concerns, right? As we start to process stuff, and, going from being a protector and provider of your family, and suddenly you feel less than because you don't have this job, and then all these other things are falling apart, which are natural processes, but they're all happening at the same time, and now you have to manage all that. So how did you? Well, I mean, just man, how did you pull yourself up from that, or where did it end up? It got darker, didn't it?
It got dark. So
you told me
there was a lot of So I'll get into that if it's okay. Like because I think that's the important part about talking about all this. To be honest with you, that's kind of why I relive it and talk about it. Is because it's so important to share what happened. I think. So shame kicked in, which I don't think I'd ever felt shame in my life, but everybody was failing in my house. My son had anxiety. He had never had that. My daughter was melting down. My wife was drinking. I had no money in the bank. I'm no longer a provider. And like, I feel like this failure, dude. And I've never felt like a failure in my whole life because I'm a hard charger, and even if there's a problem, I barrel through it.
Get after
exactly.
It, yeah.
And so I've never been in that position, and it was just really, really hard. And, but I came close to killing myself to get to what you were talking about. And I think everybody's journey on that is very different. But for me, it caught me very unaware. And I had like in retrospect, the signs are obvious, but I had no suicidal ideations. I had no idea that this was a vulnerability of mine despite these circumstances. And so I just, I shared this with you the other day. I had a really bad day. I just, like, my daughter had a meltdown and was getting kicked out of school. I had to miss a doctor's appointment that would have been helpful for me because of that. I was trying to help my dad wrangle my mom because she was trying to get into other strangers' cars on Central Avenue, running away from him and almost causing a car accident. And she's motherfucking me. And that's my mom, but she has dementia. And that's like how it presented for her. And my wife came home and we were fighting, and I don't remember why, but she like threw a watch at me. And then I left the house, dude, and I went into my truck, and I don't even remember the drive. And I ended up in Sunny Slope in some parking lot where I'm not even familiar, just like isolated. And I had my gun in my hand, and I was 100% ready to kill myself. Like, not thinking about it, like it was happening, and I had no choice on it. That's what I didn't know, that this is a real thing that happens to people, but like, I feel like it's super important. And that's where I was saying, I think my weakest point was that my check engine light was going off for a long time, and I didn't know it because we're so tough and we can barrel through those things. And like, we
compartmentalize. It's just exactly what we do, right?
And but it's almost like driving around with your dashboard covered up and you don't even know that your check engine lights are going off. Like, I didn't know it was so bad because I didn't have that awareness of like my mind and my emotions. And so I had my hand on my gun, I had my finger on the trigger, and I was like, it was so weird, dude. I felt like I had to kill myself the way you would have to take your hand off of a stove if it was hot. I didn't want to do it. I think I don't understand it exactly, but I think my brain just finally said, like, this is enough pain and I can no longer tolerate this. But every night I went to bed like, I'm going to dig us out of this. Like, how do I get through this, God? Like, it wasn't ever like a defeated attitude. That's what was so weird. But I had like, just like the throwing up, I was having my heart was racing. I was like hyperventilating, like our panic attack patients, which I've never experienced that.
Yeah.
My like vision was kind of tunneling in. I was just sobbing because I was thinking about what I was going to be leaving my family with. But I also felt like powerless, like out of my control. And then I ended up putting the gun in my mouth. And I had my finger on the trigger, and I was starting to put pressure on the trigger, and I'm just fucking sobbing. And I'm like, this is how it ends, dude. What a fucked up way for my life to end. It's a good life, you know? And the grace of God, I was trying so hard to not do it. I was like wrestling with myself, and one breath cut through it all. I think it's my meditation practice, which is like on steroids before this, but I had already been meditating for a long time. I interrupted the cycle, and I got a breath, and I got the gun out of my mouth, and my glove box was hanging open, and I put it in the glove box. And I sound like a crazy person telling this story, but this is just the way it is. I can't sugarcoat it. It was like the gun was the enemy, dude. And all of a sudden I was like, I had been attacked by an enemy that I didn't know was there. And I like couldn't get away from it fast enough. Like, that sounds so silly and weird, but that is just what I experienced. Like it was dynamite, dude. And like, so I got the gun away, like the gun was going to kill me, not me. You know what I mean? Yeah. And I like flung myself, like pushed myself back out of my truck. I ended up kind of stumbling out and landing on the concrete in the parking lot. Third time in my life, throwing up. Your body keeps the score. Your body does all this stuff with weird emotions. I didn't learn that until this happened to me. But so I'm sobbing, I'm throwing up, I'm crying, and I'm just praying, dude. Like, help me. Like I knew I would never kill myself. I knew it. Like now that's a vulnerability. I have no idea how I'm going to make sure that never happens. Holy fuck, I can't believe that happened. But nothing has changed. Like everything is still a mess at home right now, and everybody's still dead. And I've missed Dan's funeral, and everything is still going on. So my prayer was just like the most authentic praying I've ever prayed. I just sat in that parking lot for God knows how long, just saying, "Help me, like help me. I know I need to do this, but I can't do it. Like I want to. I don't know how. Like, will you help me, God? Like it was just help me, please. Like desperation, just fucking help." Like I need help. I remember saying I'm tapping out. Is like I think what I told God. Like I'm tapping out. Like I'm not quitting, but I don't know what to do with this. Yeah. But I know I'm not gonna fucking leave my family like this, or go out like that. Thank God. Like I had a second chance. So trying to piece all this together, I called up a counselor who I had seen several years ago, but like. It was my introduction to counseling, but I didn't really have any issues since then. He gave me some tools. That's a lot of where I learned meditation and stuff like that. Left him a voicemail, said, "Mike, I know I haven't talked to you in a long time, but like I just almost killed myself. I think I'm in crisis. I don't really know who to turn to." I called my buddy Brandley, who's captain paramedic out in Surprise, but he lives by me in Phoenix, and I just said, "Dude, I just almost killed myself. Like, can I come talk to you? And will you take my gun? And I don't feel at risk of doing it again, but like," and he's like, "Yeah, of course." And he's a good dude. And I went down there, and it's awful, but it's pretty awesome that it happened. We just cried together. Like, we had lost another one of our friends to suicide not too long before, and he had been on the call doing the cleanup. So like he obviously has his baggage, and it's two manly dudes just hugging and crying is very powerful, dude. And drove home from Brantley's. On the way home, my counselor called, and he's like, "I'm happy to get you in." We set up an appointment. Went home, got cleaned up, talked to my wife, and kind of just told her the Cliff Notes of like, I literally just almost killed myself. You're drinking like lots of days, if not every day. The kids are floundering. Like, this is fucked, and we got to pick up the pieces. And I don't know how, because every 5 seconds I'm getting a phone call about a bill I can't pay or somebody who's dying. But like, we got to do this, Les, And thank God she was like, "Yes, like I want help too, and we need to do this." And so that was this summer, and she's a teacher. And so we had already spent all of our medical deductible because I was on this shitty plan. Our fire department insurance is great. When you leave the job, it kind of sucks and you have a high deductible. But I had, because of all of our medical expenses, when workers' comp wasn't covering for everything, I had met my deductible so she could go to the Meadows outpatient facility, and it was going to be like next to nothing. I don't know. We paid like 10%, and the timing was perfect. They had an intake going on, and she could go during June and July, which is when she was off. This was like May when this happened. And so over the next couple of days, she started researching, checking herself in, and I got back into therapy with my counselor. I started digging deep in with our kids. I started asking for resources like grief and anxiety workbooks for children, and I was just like nerding out, dude. I was looking at your book collection, from like self-help books to like graduate post-traumatic growth psychology textbook. I was just trying to take it all in and like figure out the way I did the captain's test. How do I do like my family and getting healthy again? Like take all of that way that I act and get healthy again. And I just, you never know how much you don't know until you start looking into this. Like I was
Yeah.
learning how to help my kids with their emotions, but I was learning all about my mind and my emotions too. And then my wife was coming home and teaching me what she was learning at the Meadows for like sobriety and trauma and marital conflict resolution. And it was like amazing. We were learning all these skills, but also I was like, what the fuck? Like,
Where's this been?
where has this been my whole life? Like,
Yeah.
and how am I leading these two children? And I was leading grown men on a fire truck. Like, we're so deficient here, but then also we're getting so good, which is cool.
Yeah.
And we started
Yeah.
learning how to put a narrative to our process and how to write out and label our feelings and how to say this happened and I felt like this and can I sit with you in that, and all these like tools and how to not stack up resentments and how to do healthy conflict resolution and how to take time to check in with my dashboard and know what it means when my jaw is clenched or my heart is racing or I'm having anxiety thoughts, how to redirect those thoughts, or how to all of these things. Just over the next year or two, we just kind of we started to get healthy, and we had more losses. We lost our other dog, we lost my mom, but it was different, dude. Like, we knew how to grieve. My whole family, my kids even, like, it still hurt, but it was like we were so equipped to handle the stress.
Right.
And like, just it just sounds like bullshit, but like I never fight with my wife now, because when you have an algorithm for how to fight a fire is not that much different for an algorithm on how to resolve conflict. Like, I bring it up when it's a good time for you. I listen empathetically. We don't go tit for tat. We don't get defensive. We do one thing at a time. Like, all these algorithms we have, they're amazing. Like, and same thing with sitting with your kids with emotion or grief. For me, like, now I know, like, I learned about expressive letter writing. I had never done that, but the counselor had me start writing letters to myself before I got hurt on the truck, what it's going to be like. Hey, you're about to experience this. It's going to suck, bro. Or like letters to my deceased loved ones.
Mm-hmm.
For me, those, not every tool works for everybody. That was a powerful tool. So then my mom died. I knew I needed to sit down and write some letters. Like, man, I was looking at Sophie today, my daughter. She looks just like you. I miss you, Mom, or whatever. And then I'll cry, and that's super uncomfortable. But then I feel 1,000 pounds lighter, and I'm not at risk of killing myself. And I'm a great example for my kids on how to grieve. So It's like we do that hard work, and I learned those tools.
Yeah. You know, you bring up the word you just said there. Do the work. Do the hard work.
Yeah.
It's one of those things that my wife and I will talk about routinely. And she's like, something will come up, and she's like, you need to go do the work on that. And I'm like, when she first started talking about it, I'm like, I don't even know what that means. I don't know what that means. What exactly am I supposed to go do? Right. And, for her and I, we've been married almost 32 years now. And there's this growth and learning that happens, and yet, and sometimes we're not in the same place with that learning, right? And she's way ahead of me always, and so she's dragging me along, and I'm over there kicking and screaming, going, I don't understand what's happening right now, but labeling and beginning to try to actually understand what we're feeling is profoundly important. And that was the work, right? Is trying to figure out where we experience trauma. And there's so many times like, well, I haven't been traumatized. I have a great life. But when you really start to think about the things you've experienced, especially for our brothers and sisters in public safety, there's a lot of shit that we see, that we do, that we smell, that we taste, that is not normal. And it's okay, because that's what we signed up to do. However, we have to be realistic about it. When we go on a pediatric drowning, that's a fucking awful call. And you need to unpack that. And that's okay.
Yes.
Right? When you have, relationship with your wife, and this idea that we're going to learn how to have real conversations and really talk about what we're feeling. You want to have a quality relationship, then you have to do the work.
Yes.
Right? To have that relationship.
Yes, brother.
Yeah.
And sometimes the work can be sitting in a feeling. That's the work.
Yeah.
Like that, but that's so uncomfortable.
So unpack that for us, because I like to think I got that all figured out. But but what I would like you to do is talk a little bit about how we connect with our feelings in a meaningful way.
Okay.
Right.
So awareness is the key in the first place. Like you had a great point. You were like, a lot of us were like, I didn't experience any trauma, or that call didn't bother me. But have you sat with it and investigated it? Because not knowing something is going on is not the same thing as something not going on. And a lot of times, like, we're sharing grief, right? Like, how many guys do you know who have lost a parent and who, you ask them like, wow, what did you do to process that grief? Oh, nothing. It sucked. And we went to the funeral and I moved on. Like, bro, you didn't, because that stuff doesn't go away. Your mind and your emotions have a long memory, and your body, and they store those emotions. And so it's super, I know our mutual friend Billy has shared this a lot. I think I've heard you say though, like, it's okay to not be okay, but it's also okay to be okay.
Mm-hmm.
It's not only okay to be okay, it's preferable to be okay. We need to train our guys up so that everybody's not just okay and surviving, but fucking thriving. Like, okay should be the minimum of where the bar is set. We should be fucking doing great, but it is okay to not be doing great, and it's okay to be doing great, but at a minimum, it's not the ostrich sticking his head in the sand and just saying, we're doing great because we're tough firemen. Like, no, bro, like, do your kids feel like you're supporting them through their emotional struggles at home? Do you know how to talk to them about them? That's one element. If you stop and have a conversation with your deceased mom, does it bring up feelings in your body? Like, you might have more to get off your chest. If a guy cuts you off in traffic, can you take a breath and get back to your coffee? Or are you beating on your chest like Donkey Kong, like a ridiculous grown man throwing a temper tantrum? These are things that are super important to just be aware of with no judgment, because I did all of them. Those are all my examples. But like, to be aware that we have feelings, we have emotions, we have experiences. Everybody has different ways of processing and releasing them, but they don't go away on their own. They don't, for sure. And what you resist persists, and ignoring something is resisting, and you don't want it to persist. It's like if you have these bad calls we go on, or these deaths we have, if you have, like, you step on a thorn, you got to pull that thorn out, and that's the processing of the feeling, and that kind of hurts. But you don't want to get comfortable and let that thorn have a callus, and then you're kind of walking funny, and then you don't even notice it anymore, because then you get like gangrene and you got to lose the foot, So it's important to pull these thorns out, and sometimes just doing the work is being willing to set aside your masculine ego and to cry, or to say, I'm having a hard time and I need help, or whatever. But it is so important to circle back to what you had asked. How are we aware of that? Well, to take inventory, just like you would on a truck. Like, every morning you have a pass down report with the other crew, and you check off the EMS equipment, you check off the water in the tank. Like, how are my relationships? Do you meditate even just for 5 minutes? Check in with your body. How's your heart rate? How's your breathing? Observe your thoughts. Are they ruminating, or is it like crystal clear beach landscape in there? Does your wife feel loved and supported? Or if you asked her, would she say, no, he's shut down and he comes home, he doesn't talk to work? Like, there's a lot of things that you can do to check off those things, but it starts with just authentically being willing to take an inventory, and cultivating that awareness, I think, is the first step.
Yeah. What's your thought on going to therapy?
I have mixed feelings on it. I like to be honest about it. In a lot of ways, therapy saved me, and I've learned so many different tools and modalities from amazing therapists. And in a lot of ways, my therapist didn't help me for shit, and I wasted a lot of money. So I think therapy is a tool in the tool belt that some people need, and can be used, and can be insanely effective. But it's not. I don't like want every fireman to be in therapy, but I also don't want like no fireman to be in therapy either.
Right.
And I also think it's important we talk about what your temperament is, what your life experience is, and then what therapeutic options are available. So like, if you've had a lot of rough calls, but you're not like me and you don't want to write letters and get into your feelings, EMDR is super helpful for a lot of guys. It helps them reframe things. It's almost like miraculous. Same thing, different thing. Some people have different experiences with ketamine. Like talk therapy, for example, if you're not solution focused, that can be a problem. If you're just like, a lot of people go, I don't want to just bitch about my problems all day. That can be a rut that people fall into with therapy. But also, if you have somebody who you're paying and you have good insurance and they're an empathetic ear, and you run rough calls and you have marriage struggles and you're a parent and you have life, it's not that healthy to vent that on your friends for an hour or two at a time. And I look at that like the pressure relief valve, right? Like, we like that these big tanker trucks have a pressure relief valve so they don't explode and kill us while they're driving down the highway. It can be really good for some people to sit down. If you find chemistry and you have a therapist who you can trust, even to not look for a solution, just to go, fuck, the bills are rough and my kids are screaming all the time and being a dad isn't what I thought it would stack up to be, and I didn't get this promotion and my boss is a dick. Here's an hour, see you later. That can be not good for people because it can get them stuck, or that can be a miracle for some people. So I think it's like working out. I would know you did endurance stuff. Like I don't think I was built for triathlons, but like every yoga, working out, martial arts, boxing, there's a million ways to get fit. I think it's important that you exercise your mind and emotions so that you're fit for duty. And therapy can be a component and a tool, but it needs to be utilized properly. And sometimes it can cost you a lot of money. Or like I had a therapist kind of like, I don't want to say abandon me. She had an unexpected pregnancy, but it was like my first time I unpacked all of this stuff in therapy after Mike. So I had he retired, and then I finally was making progress with her. It took like 6 months, and then she bounced, and it was like, that one was more devastating to my mental health.
You start all over.
I had to start, or I didn't for a while because I didn't want to go do that. Like find a new person, dump all my trauma. Now I'm looking for solutions. So but also at the same time, like the family therapist, my kids are thriving now, and they were marginal, bro. It was real. Like I didn't even get into it here on this. Like it was marginal. And my kid's counselor is a miracle worker and taught us so many, like same thing with those expressive letters that like I'm happy as fuck despite all the calamity in my life because of these tools. So I'm pro therapy, but I just think you need to have eyes wide open and be informed on it.
So I think you're touching on a really important point, which is that the modality depends on the individual, and which is very clear in what you're saying. And when we talk about doing the work, that means you have to be willing to for it not to be perfect, but you have to pay attention to that. So you go to So I'll give you an example. I started with a therapist, and it turned into a bit of a bro fest, and I'm like, oh, this isn't the hard work that I should be doing. Okay. I love the guy. I think he's fantastic. The chemistry's too good.
Yeah.
Right? We were having too much fun, and it turned into more of a coaching session than it was therapeutic. But that same guy pointed out some really interesting things for me that were very helpful. So not a total loss, but I had to move on and do something different. And so I see value in it, but I also see the point of what we're trying to do here is the work and figuring out what that work is for us individually. And you know, where to go? In your guide that you put together here, you talk about, I think you call them exercises. Is that what you call them? Yeah. Workouts or exercises?
It's all exercises and workouts. Everything is fitness because it really is mental and emotional fitness, right?
Well, I talk all the time about flossing our mind.
It's floss.
Right? So like, hey, we go to the gym, we stretch, we do yoga, we work out, we lift weights, we run, whatever it is that we try to do, but we got to stay busy, we got to stay fit.
Yeah.
And our minds are the same way, right?
Yes.
We have to invest in taking care of our brains.
100%.
So what are some of your things that you share with people to do that?
Meditation is a big one, and it doesn't have to be like I'm a monk sitting on a mountain meditation. It can be just focused attention where you're grounded in the present moment, and you're observing your thoughts, or you're observing your body, or you're getting out of your mind and into the present moment. Because for me, it's kind of one of those, you're killing a million birds with one stone. Like if you sit down and meditate for 5 or 10 minutes every day, there's a number of health benefits as far as like longevity and all these other like supplemental things. But it also, to me, it gives you access to that dashboard. Like we would never pump a fire without looking at our panel, right? Like and opening up your gate valve, like all, like it would be insane, right? Like to know your water pressure and all that. But we go around in this meat suit that's holding the soul that we don't even understand consciousness, and we're not looking at the pump panel at all. Like you gotta just check in for a minute, and like so that one is very important to me. And it doesn't have to be formal. It can be throughout the day several times. Like practice the pause.
Do you personally recommend certain types? I know there's different types of guided meditations. There's, just sit and be quiet and count your breathing, like that kind of thing. Like try to turn the world off for a minute. What do you like to do, or what do you recommend?
There's a few different types, and I actually created a course for first responders that I do like a week-long meditation course, and I've done it down at Gripstick at the Academy. It's the traditional meditation practices that you're talking about, but in our language. So like I would use the pump panel analogy, or I would say like, hey, your brain is a dick and it's trying to rob your attention and put it in the future or the past. And the only place that you can find resilience and happiness is in the present moment. So that's why we're doing this. Saying little things like that our language, that our people understand. But just like working out, I think there's a few different forms of meditation that are important. Like you might be heavy into cardio and just do a little bit of strength training and flexibility, but you should really do all three, right? it's kind of important to be able to do like a body scan check-in, a couple of different ones where you focus, where you learn to build your muscle of focus and attention, like listening to a meditation bell for 10 minutes straight, and you kind of just listen, and you're really trying to key in, almost like our hearing test, like when does the bell fade? And that's like a little bit of a tedious exercise, but these are muscles. And when you strengthen your concentration, or when you practice redirecting a thought. So like you do a regular sitting meditation, you recognize that you're thinking, you come back to the breath, that's a rep on the bench press, right? Over time, you get a big ass chest because you're doing rep after rep. And then you complement that with the concentration practice. Well, your brain is going to try and focus on every single thing other than what makes you happy, other than what's you're grateful for than what's in the right now. It's like you're nervous about tomorrow, you're irritated about yesterday. In general, most of us, our minds want to go to future or past. But you can have like this superpower where you can redirect, you can put that fire hose where you want it, and then you can hold your concentration on, because the reality is the glass is half empty and half full for all of us, right? There's some awesome shit and some really devastating stuff. And where you keep your focus and your attention in your mind is a lot of what creates how healthy and happy and resilient you are. So to be able to do these practices, which then empower you to, I liken it to like your mind is almost like if you had some form of Tourette syndrome and your hand, like, this is not a knock on people without disability, that's a rough thing, but like if your hand is touching hot stoves and punching people, that's a problem and it's going to get you into trouble. But if you can control your hands, you can give fist bumps, you can do cool, like you can create things, you can write, you can do work, but like you need to be the user of the tool, not the other way around.
Right.
And these practices, our mind will use us as like a parasite and think half the time we're not thinking about the stuff we want to. We're like at our mind's mercy, and like we're getting pimped by our mind, bro. And so that's why I'm big on those meditations. Yeah. And so to answer your question, I do a few practices like that foster those muscles.
Well, there's a few in here, and you talked about, I'm flipping through your guide here, and it talked about mindful eating. And I'm like, oh, diet. And then I'm like, oh, this isn't about diet at all.
No. You can do it with an M&M if you want.
Yeah. Yeah. This is about focusing your attention on the specific elements of what you're doing. It's sort of a mindful meditation, if you will. And I used to, I like to think of, I used to run a lot. And for me, running was a moving meditation.
Yes.
Right? I would think about like, okay, what am I feeling right now? Oh, I feel some discomfort in my feet. Oh, I can feel the terrain shifting under my feet, like trail running or what have you. Oh, I can feel the wind or the hot sun from this direction. And those things were very clarifying for me.
Oh yeah. That's meditation, brother.
Yeah. It was amazing. And, I think about where we're at today. Why is it so hard for us to be mindful? And I heard this comedian the other day, and I'll just share his shtick because it was so funny to me. But he goes, hey man, I was a kid in the 80s. He goes, we talk about being mindful. He goes, I was mindful 50% of my life. I would go to the toilet to take a shit and just take a shit. That's all I would do is focus on that one thing.
That's true.
He goes, and then I would go to school or go to the bus stop to catch the bus. And I'm waiting for the bus. And I'm just there waiting. No one to talk to, nothing to look at, no podcast to listen to, no phone to troll. And I'm like, he's so right.
Yes.
Right. In today's day, the moment we have a moment to ourselves, we pick up our phone and we dive in. And so many times, how does this affect my relationships? Well, I've been in meetings where I tune out and I'm like, phone, flip, or I'm talking to my family and there's a lull and I grab my phone and flip, and I'm not paying attention and I'm not in the moment. And so I love what you're talking about here because this practice of mindfulness, this practice of meditation pulls us into the moment. And when we talk about doing the therapeutic work or the mental work that we need to do to be successful, it involves us being acutely aware of ourselves.
Yes.
And I think that's just for me to summarize, that's my big takeaway is we have to be very aware of our own emotions, what we're feeling in the moment. And the only way to do that is to practice feeling the moment.
Bingo.
Yeah.
100%, bro. That's exactly my stance on it as well.
Yeah.
It's that self-awareness, and just like you would never go fight a fire without analyzing your fire ground factors ever.
Right.
You would never do it. Like just you want to know as much as you can from the outside before you go in. We're not going to wait and not fight it, but like smoke coming from the gabled in, we know people said there's nobody in the house or whatever. Like
right.
the meditation, the present moment, the grounding, the things that you just talked about, they cultivate that self-awareness. And I view our emotions as our fireground factors for life and for our relationships. And so it's gathering that intel. It's doing the 360 before you go in. It's pausing to take a breath before you get on the radio. We do this at work all the time.
Right.
But, and to circle back, because I accidentally didn't answer your question, what do I recommend? Those formal practices that I have are basically designed to get you to where you got on the trail run. I think guided meditations are really good until the goal is not for me to be your guided meditation teacher forever. When I teach these firemen how to meditate, my goal is to empower them to then go out and do whatever they like to do, whether it's trail running, a skills course, a hot shower, a sitting breathing practice, just for them to have the skills and the awareness to do their own observing. But in the interim, when you're not used to it, guided meditations are super helpful because they lay out the fundamentals.
Yeah.
And then I think it's good to have a formal guided practice, at least a few days a week for me, of like a body scan or a breathing pattern that specifically puts a little voice in my head that prompts me to do something that throughout the course of 10 minutes I know is going to like reset my nervous system or whatever.
Right.
But it's essentially if you're already mindful. Part of it is we grew up without phones, so I think we can tap into that. Like,
well, but we think we have to try.
We have to try 100%.
I think we've lost sight of that.
I think so too.
I know I have.
But then
so
when
much.
I get still, most of us, what we learn first is it's very uncomfortable to sit still, to watch your thoughts, to wait, like the guy waiting for the bus. Try taking a shit without your phone. It's like so hard. But then that's a red flag.
I will go halfway across the house to pick up my phone to go to the bathroom.
But then I go, that's an indicator like that it's hard for you to jog a mile. That doesn't mean jog less. That means we got to get you in shape, right? So like to sit with our feelings and to be aware of them is uncomfortable. Nothing wrong with that. Yeah. But it is an indicator that we need to practice being still more. And then, dude, I'm finding like the pendulum swings. You get a taste of it and you get 10 minutes after you've done it a few times and it's not so uncomfortable, and all of a sudden 10 minutes away from your phone and into the breath, it's like a drug, dude. Like everybody's like, oh, that feels so good. And they kind of almost become addicted to the practice. At least that's what happened to me. And I'm shocked that other firefighters are too now, surprisingly.
No, that's great. Let me pull this to a close. I got some rapid fire questions for you.
Okay.
Simple answers, short form.
Let's go.
All right. If you could travel to any place in the world, money's no object, where would you go?
Oh, that's a great question. Bali.
That's beautiful. And a long ways away.
Yeah.
All right. What's one thing that you're doing these days that brings you joy?
What I'm doing right now, literally connecting with other firefighters and speaking openly about our experiences and connecting on emotions, so that as fucked up as we are, if my son is a firefighter, this will be normalized by the time he gets on the job, brings me so much joy and passion that I feel it's hard to put into words how grateful I am to be able to do things like this. What I'm doing right now with you, brother. Thank you for having me, by the way.
Right on. All right. What's your favorite book to recommend?
Oh, that's a good one. Okay. Can I do a few, or does it have to be
one?
All right. For Untethered Soul is really good. And The Power of Now. Both of those are deep and they're like esoteric and they can be challenging for firefighters, but they're like textbooks. These books, I have probably read each of them 10 times. I tackle them like twice a year. Like you don't want to just read them to get through them, but like that whole thorn and the gangrene thing with the emotions, I got that from The Untethered Soul. And a lot of my mindfulness and understanding of my own psychology and how it almost killed me and also how it's making me so happy came from the book called The Power of Now. And it's basically just a question and answer format from an amazing meditation teacher. And people ask like, well, what do I do when my mind is racing because of X, Y, or Z? And it's just like, it's a guidebook for your mind and how to tap into the present moment and do all the stuff that we talked about.
All right. I love it. Last question. The title of this podcast is Fireground Fitness. So what does it mean to you to be Fireground Fit?
I cheated on this question because I've been listening to your podcast. So I
might have asked this every single time.
I really wanted a good answer to this. And here's the most authentic, truthful answer.
That's the best.
I started with Googling what fit for duty means. And I found like some generic definitions like OSHA, military, and generally you're able to adequately and competently perform all of your job functions without any inherent risk to you or the people you serve. You're basically able to do the job. That's fit for duty, right? I take that viewpoint as a definition of fit for duty, but fireground fit to me means that, plus you take pride in it. You're not just competent and adequate at doing the job. You kick ass at it, whether it's BLS, ALS, engineer, firefighter, or captain. you're a professional and you take pride and you're a craftsman at your trade because we love what we do and we're thankful to be in a position to do it. And we honor our brothers and sisters and we care about the people we serve. So basically the regular definition of fit plus like with a level of pride and professionalism that is next level. But what struck me was on all of the definitions, it was all constantly trained on and constantly evaluated mentally, physically, and emotionally. That's what the OSHA and the military definition of fit for duty were. And I feel like, as we've talked about, the struggle is that we're ignoring whether we're emotionally fit for duty or not. Physical fitness, I mean, minimum company standards, multi-company drills, breathe down drills, skills courses. Like, we're definitely making sure that we're adequate physically on the job. We've got that covered. We're training on it and we're perpetually evaluating, even if it's just on a tailboard after a fire during a debrief, right? Same thing with mentally. Medic CEs, that same debrief on the fire, like how did our tactics go? We're pretty good at that too. When is the last time you trained or were assessed on any sort of emotional fitness for duty? Not at all, except for like what we're doing right now with this or with this new training that we're doing. And so for me, the big thing about fit for duty is it's so glaringly obvious that 99% of us are fit for duty in 2 out of the 3 areas. And we're absolutely deficient in the 3rd area. And it's causing broken marriages, astronomical addiction and dependency rates, and suicides, like what nearly happened to me. And so I don't think it's acceptable that we turn a blind eye to our emotional fitness for duty. And that's no more important. It's just got to be equally important. So that's kind of my viewpoint on that.
I love it. Well, thank you. Where can people find you?
Instagram is probably my best hub. That's like where I have
What's your
everything.
handle?
The Joe Spector, only because Joe Spector was taken, and I hit the guy up when I started my podcast, and he said he would give me the handle for $1,500, and I didn't have $1,500, so I'm the Joe Spector now, but it's TheJoe
awesome.
Spector on Instagram, and that's the hub to the podcast and the website and the meditations and everything else too is all on there.
Right on. Well, Joe, thank you, man. I appreciate you taking the time. I appreciate what you're doing out there in the world for public safety and our mental health. Truly appreciate that. And thank you for sitting and rapping with us.
Likewise, brother. I'm very thankful that you had me here, and I'm really proud of what you guys are doing here. This is incredible. And so thanks for giving me the opportunity to share my story. But more importantly, like, you're taking care of the people you're leading from physical, mental, and emotional. And it's very apparent. And I don't want to schmooze you too much, but my heart is swollen with pride. And so it's awesome, dude.
All right. Thank you, my friend.
All right, that's all we have for today, folks. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you, Joe, for sharing your time, your experiences, and the lessons learned. If you're enjoying this podcast, get on over to Apple Podcasts, rate and review. That helps other people find their way to this podcast so they can learn the same lessons that you're learning. That being said, take the things that you heard here today, find a way to put them into your life. Do these things that will help you be more resilient, more competent emotionally, more competent spiritually. Reevaluate and develop yourself. This is something that is so important. Put in the work that we talked about. Now, go on out there and get some.